The device here because I think it looks a little bit better going landscape. What we're going to be doing today here is we're talking about some of the remaining parts of Unit 2, practice problem number 4 for macroeconomics. Okay, I repeat, Unit 2, problem 4 for macroeconomics. And we're going to take a look at them here. Let me switch the camera. We're going to start with Unit 2, practice problem number 4, part B. Starts on the classical or vertical segment. The dollar is gaining value versus foreign currency, which means American exports are more expensive in foreign currency. This will make net export spending decrease, and make AD shift to the left. Remember, the time frame is only 9 months, so we start and finish in the same segment of aggregate supply where we begin. If you take a look here after AD shifts to the left, we have a drop in the CPI, but remember, our potential GDP here, no change in real GDP. For practice problem 4, part C, we're in the Keynesian or horizontal segment. We have a decrease in the interest rate charged on commercial loans. This affects the cost of buying capital resources. This makes investment spending increase because it's cheaper for businesses to borrow money to buy capital resources. The AD curve shifts to the right. CPI, though, stays the same, remember. We have a real GDP increase. It stays the same because, remember, time frame's not long enough to leave the segment where we started. Moving on to problem 4, part F. We're starting in the intermediate segment again. Remember, black is starting position, blue is later position. The cost of employing nurses and orderlies and lab techs and doctors in hospitals and medical clinics are going up. When that happens, that's an increase in the cost of a key resource, which means there's less production. The classical segment, which is vertical, shifts left. The intermediate segment, which is upward sloping, shifts left. And we have a shortening of the Keynesian or horizontal segment to the left. It does not move up vertically. It's not 20 years, remember. Notice how the CPI is increasing and the real GDP is decreasing. So that's the solution to problem 4, part F. We did G in class previously. Here is part H. For Unit 2, practice problem 4, part H, we started in the intermediate segment, where we're told that the technology used for recycling has improved, so businesses can use mostly recycled paper, recycled metal, and recycled plastic. It costs a lot less to use recycled material. The metal is 1/10 the cost, paper is 1/3 the cost, plastic is half the cost of new material. This is a technological base that is improving, and it's affecting key industries. So that means the classical segment of AS is shifting to the right, the intermediate is shifting to the right, and the Keynesian is lengthening to the right. Since we started intermediate segment, and again, not long enough to leave that segment, we see a drop in the CPI from CPI 1 to CPI 2, and we see an increase in real GDP from real GDP 1 to real GDP 2. So that's that correct answer. For letter I, we're in the intermediate segment, and we're told there's an increase in consumers' wealth. Again, for those who are just joining us, the intersection with AD1 and AS in black is the starting position. AD2 is where it moves to. When households have more wealth, consumer spending increases, and the AD curve shifts to the right. The CPI increases, and we also have an increase in real gross domestic product as well. It started intermediate, it finished intermediate. Letter J. Letter J, we started intermediate segment, and we were told in letter J that the government is going to lower the excise taxes on petrochemicals. Petrochemicals include such things as gasoline, jet fuel, plastics, diesel. That affects the cost of packaging and transporting everything. But because it's an excise tax, remember, excise taxes don't affect spending, they only affect production costs. Government factors have lowered production costs in a key industry. And so the classical segment of the aggregate supply curve is shifting to the right. The intermediate segment is shifting to the right. The Keynesian segment is getting longer. But notice what's happening. The CPI is dropping when we're moving from our starting to our later equilibrium here, and real GDP gets bigger. For letter K is dealing with the Keynesian segment, the horizontal segment. Again, let me zoom in if it'll let me. There we go, okay? And what's happening here is that it says in letter K, the national income of Canada, Mexico, the European Union, and Australia all increase. These are countries we trade with. They're like our customers, and we are a business. This means that, well, our customers got a pay raise, so they're going to buy more American exports. So net export spending is increasing, ladies and gentlemen. When net export spending increases, the AD curve shifts to the right. But since we're in that Keynesian segment, there is no change in CPI. It's the same vertical height it was before, but there is an increase in real GDP. For letter L, we start classical segment. What ends up happening here in the classical segment for letter L is that the cost of water, the cost of seed, fertilizer, and labor is all increasing. When you have an increase in the cost of these particular items, that's a resource cost going up, and that's for agriculture. That's a major industry. So when you have an increase in the cost of key resources, that means there's less production. The AS curve is going to shift to the left. But we're in the classical segment, and so be mindful, it's a vertical segment. As AS shifts to the left, the classical segment moves left, the intermediate segment moves left, and the Keynesian segment shortens. But look at that macro equilibrium here. The macro equilibrium, we have a rise in CPI and a drop in real GDP. So that's the correct answer to letter L. And then last but not least, letter M. Letter M is actually some contractionary fiscal policy, in fact. Notice AD is crossing AS in the classical or vertical segment. It states in the problem that as part of contractionary fiscal policy, the government is lowering its own spending. In other words, as it says over here, as the student wrote, government spending is decreasing. When there's a decrease in government spending, the aggregate demand curve, this student was using a lowercase a instead of a triangular A, so forgive that student. AD is shifting to the left. When AD shifts to the left, in the classical segment, we have a decrease in CPI, but real GDP is staying the same. Alrighty, let me switch cameras back here. Alright, now students here, my whole point in posting this here is because I know that as we are going on to spring break, not everybody wants to be in class. And I still want to make sure that we get to communicate this stuff so everybody gets the material that they need covered. Okay? Hopefully this will help all the macro students as you're finishing up Unit 2 and working Problem 5 on the homework. And that's my intent of doing this for you. Everybody have a lovely day, and thank you very much.